Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for joining. We'll be getting today into the most important aspects of fashion's digital transformation to give you an overview of this movement and to give real solutions to brands and other players of the industry who are open to it. So speaking today will be myself. My name is Yuti and I'm the digital marketing manager of Eurytech, and Melanie, who I'll let introduce herself.
So hi, I'm Melanie and I'm Eurytech's fashion editor. And so before we get into the meat of the content, I'm going to introduce Eurytech quickly for those of you that are new here, for those of you that aren't familiar, and to explain a little bit why we're talking about digital transformation in the first place. So Eurytech, we are a trend forecasting company, and we use an image recognition technology to scan images, mostly on social media, to provide trend insights to brands. So the analysis of our data and fashion experts together are accessible in our platform, which you can see in this image on the right, with information on anything from a trend's geography, seasonality, audience, market demand, and more. And we find it's important to discuss digital transformation because with this, the industry and the world in general is changing quite rapidly with all of these new digital solutions. So we're proud to be working with brands like Louis Vuitton, Moncler, Adidas, Havaianas, and many others to accompany them in their digital transformation. So we aim to collect, analyze, and provide you with concrete facts in an effort to maybe help you as well move toward a more complete digital transformation.
Thank you, Melanie. So before we start, let's get an overview of the main points we're going to be discussing. So first of all, it is important to understand the movement of digital transformation and discuss the obvious reasons of its necessity regarding consumer and commerce. Then we will be presenting some key organizational transformations and go through the changing values around it. Finally, we will sum up the key takeaways of this discussion to give you a clear overview of digital transformation of the fashion industry. So let's start with a quick overview of this fascinating movement. So what is digital transformation? Generally, it is the process of transforming systems and strategies within a business through digital means. This is very broad, but it does capture what's currently happening in the fashion industry. We're seeing that those who are normally digitally savvy have had an objective advantage over those who are less so, signaling the fashion companies that adaptation and innovation are the key to success moving forward. So here are some figures wrapping up the development of the fashion industry. You can see that according to Statista, the global apparel market is projected to grow and reach the value of $2.25 trillion by 2025. This number is important to know because a bigger fashion industry potentially entails more serious consequences for the planet and for efficiency. Over the past year, we've seen these challenges come out of the shadows, and industry players have had to address them more rapidly than expected. Evidently, digital transformation is a necessary shift in fashion. So here I'll be discussing social media, e-commerce, and brick and mortar stores. This section will be brief because we're quite familiar with this topic, but it is still important to mention as it is a significant part of the fashion's digital transformation. So today, the proportion of purchases made online is bigger than in-store, which is proof that shopping has fundamentally changed since the start of the pandemic. The first statistic you can see on this slide shows that consumers who had never purchased clothing before began doing so online in 2020. While this is most surely due to the stores closing all around the world, it looks like this is one new habit that will stick around post-pandemic. For instance, a report from Kibo shows that younger generations expect to purchase less at physical stores than before. These figures are a big indicator that e-commerce is a necessary channel for brands. Even for those who do have e-commerce channels already, there are improvements to be made and consumer behavior because of changing consumer behavior and new technologies. So one of these solutions is omnichannel streamlining, which is an approach in sales and marketing that combines user experience across different channels. A big driver of this is social media, as the use of mobile phone is higher than ever. If we look to these images on the right, the top image is Instagram shopping. So a user can click on a product tag and is directly taken to the brand's e-commerce site, which we can see on the left image. Note that the e-commerce site looks very similar to Instagram shopping page. This is a big way brands can take advantage of consumer behavior. If consumers are used to social media, it seems logical to bring this experience to e-commerce. On social media, brands and influencers have had to respond accordingly to adapt to new consumer requirements. And the response has been transient. Social media has become more of a place for interaction and entertainment instead of just a traditional platform to share pictures. According to a recent Gartner report, in 2020, luxury brands overall posted 81% less posts compared to 2019. This isn't because brands have gotten lazy. They've just been shifting to new features. Reels, IGTV, stories, as well as other social media channels such as TikTok. If we've learned something, is that social media needs adaptation. To sum up, here is a list of benefits for brands to get from social media. But beyond the advantages of optimizing multi-channel e-commerce or creating desirable content, social media has also less intuitive benefits, like increasing sell-through thanks to a conversion from in-app scrolling to real purchases. The reach allowed by social media combined with in-app shopping features leads to increased sales for brands if they do it right. Offline, brick and mortar stores have had a tough go of it over the past few years, and not just because of the pandemic. Consumers are no longer satisfied with the status quo. They are now so used to their worlds being digitalized that the physical stores don't always bring the right element on the table. But digital solutions exist. Oftentimes, the biggest pain point when in-store shopping is the lack of choice or efficiency. And for online shopping, it is the lack of human interactions and experience. But several solutions exist. For example, virtual shopping assistants within fitting rooms. This has been used by brands such as Reformation. This technology makes recommendations to consumers as they shop, like different sizes or different product assortments. Now I will let Melanie present some organizational transformations that are implied for these changes to happen.
Thank you. So we looked at e-commerce and social media, and it's important to talk about these aspects of digital transformation because they're often the most visible. It's the part of the value chain that consumers and brands are going to see and even think about the most. But there are other parts of the value chain that are worth looking at and understanding in terms of digital transformation. So the general definition of the value chain is anything that adds value to the product from the start to the beginning. And this shouldn't be confused with the supply chain, which is a part of the whole. So the supply chain is a small part of the entire value chain, which makes up steps like design, production, marketing, distribution, and others. And so one step, maybe even the first step of the value chain is often design. And there are more and more digital design tools today popping up to address new challenges in the value chain and in the fashion industry as a whole. And these design tools don't replace traditional design mentalities or ways of doing things, but they often boost these processes. So one of these examples is CAD software, for example. This stands for computer-assisted design. And it's pretty self-explanatory. This software allows designers to create digital 2D and 3D sketches. Platforms like Eva Engines, which is a drawing that we can see in this middle image, offer this software. They transform sketches into 2D product images for designers so that they can modify designs all throughout the process instead of completely starting from scratch like you would on paper, maybe, for example. Then we have the production step in the value chain. This concerns any activities related to, well, production, so development, product management, materials, assembly, things of that nature. And a big way that production is being revamped in the value chain is through smart factories. And so smart factories are smart because they use at least one Industry 4.0 technology. So this can be robotics, AI, analytics, Internet of Things, and so on. And it's hard to imagine today a factory that doesn't use any of these technological boosts. One example is Hugo Boss, the clothing brand Hugo Boss. They use smart factories in their production, which they describe as a digital twin to their traditional factories. So this greatly reduces the margin of error because it allows them to make adjustments digitally instead of in real life. And then some digital solutions we have for the supply chain are predictive analytics and blockchain technology. So the supply chain is the back end of product production. It's a part of the value chain again. It's a hugely complex process. It employs 60 million people globally. With globalization and decentralization, it complexifies the whole process. And so we have more and more tools that exist now to simplify the process. So we have predictive analytics, for example, which use stats and data and machine learning techniques to analyze the past to make predictions on the future. So a form of this could be database trend forecasting, for example, which could provide trends on future market demands or consumer behavior for fashion brands. We also have blockchain technology, that is a huge trend at the moment, I would say. It's a type of database which records and tracks any event in a product's life cycle. And blockchain technology is really interesting for fashion brands, mostly because it reduces opacity in the supply chain. It renders it very transparent. We can track everything that happens on a product life cycle so that all teams are aligned and all data is updated in real time. But how can brands realistically integrate these sort of digital solutions into their team organization and even their company organization? It can be pretty tricky to integrate digital transformation into brands and into companies in general. We know that a large majority of companies, though, recognize that data is an important part of the process and that it can push them further. But digital transformation, again, can be tricky because teams function differently, they think differently, and digital transformation is as much about people as it is about technology. But there are tons of ways to align and transform teams, but we chose two: blockchain and trend forecasting, which I just talked about briefly. So blockchain, beyond rendering the supply chain more transparent, it's really good for aligning teams. We can look at suppliers and manufacturers, for example, who are used to the traditional supply chain in which data often lives in silos. Manufacturers don't always know where suppliers get their raw materials. Suppliers don't always know where the product ends up in the end. But with the blockchain, raw materials and finished goods can be tracked from the source through the production all the way through the distribution network. We also have buyers and merchandisers who can use the blockchain in the sense that the blockchain can't lie about data. Anything that has happened in the product's life is there forever and it can't be tampered with. So they can use information on past data to make decisions about the future. So for planning, for stock, for drop times, and things of that nature. The second solution we could talk about is trend forecasting, which in other words is predictive analytics. They can help align designers with merchandisers in the sense that designers are the ones coming up with the ideas for the collection, for the products for the collection, the trends, but designers are often very creative minded, whereas merchandisers who are responsible for organizing the collection assortment, are quite analytical minded. And so during collection briefings, for example, they're not always speaking the same language. But with trend forecasting, each team can back their intuitions, whether it's with data or with creative insights. And so they can communicate more, and it reduces lost time, it reduces uncertainty, and so on. We also have marketers who need a macro view of the market to make decisions on who to talk to, how to talk to them, at what moment in the year, what trends in a collection to highlight. And trend forecasting helps them do this with their insights. And it also helps communicate to merchandisers and also to designers their communication plans so that everyone remains aligned. So it's important to talk about the value chain as a whole to understand concretely where digital solutions can come in and kind of change the game. But maybe an unexpected part of digital transformation is that it's helping the consumer have more of a voice, in a sense. It's helping render the industry more sustainable, which is something that we've been asking for a long time, many consumers. It's helping consumers have more representation. And there are more and more digital tools that are making this happen. So we're gonna look at a few, because this could be a whole separate webinar. So we're just gonna look at a few to get an idea of what that means. So sustainability, like I said, is a growing movement. We know that the industry, the fashion industry, can be very environmentally harmful, but we also know that consumers are asking for more sustainable efforts from their favorite brands. And we're seeing a lot of digital solutions to help make this happen, one of them being resell. Resell kind of uses the logic of a circular economy. So we're going to resell goods that already exist instead of making new ones. We see that by 2024, the predicted value of the resale, the secondhand market, is predicted to reach $6 billion US, which is huge. But resale, to be effective, it also involves some major digital transformation. So things like consumer data, their age range, their product preferences, to know how to speak with the customer and what to recommend to the customer, and even smart technologies like the blockchain. Resell, it has to be a very transparent process for it to work. So some examples of some of the most well-known resellers. We have Depop, The RealReal, and Reflaunt. So Depop and The RealReal are both platforms where consumers themselves can sell their own products that they don't want to hang on to anymore. So Depop is more geared toward very young consumers. The majority of their consumers are under the age of 26. Not necessarily brand name clothing, it's just affordable but on-trend clothing, and it's a very social platform. The RealReal is very much geared toward luxury brands. Even in the image, we can see there's Saint Laurent and Chanel. It's going to be for the consumer still young, but older as well, looking for secondhand luxury products. And then we have Reflaunt, which is a marketplace actually for brands and consumers to sell their secondhand products. So it's kind of the middleman between the brand and the consumer in the secondhand market. And Reflaunt is distinguishable because they use the blockchain to track their products throughout the life cycle, to ensure their consumers and brands that the product isn't counterfeited, for example. So Reflaunt is a really good example of using digital transformation to set themselves apart. Another unsustainable part of the fashion industry is, of course, textiles. Millions and millions of tons of textile waste end up in landfills every day around the world. But there's more and more digital tools that are popping up to eliminate this problem from the design process, so from the very start. We have some brands who recycle old textiles. So Wawa and Madewell, for example, are two of them. Madewell will recycle old jeans and turn them into housing insulation, for example. We also have brands that transform products from nature, so typically plants, into new textiles. So Myco Works, this is the brand that works with Hermes, and they make faux leather out of mycelium and agricultural waste. And then we also have Flocus, which this is the image we can see. They turned the kapok tree into a whole range of textiles, so anything from yarn to fibers to fabrics to furniture stuffing. They do a whole range of things. And both of these use adapted in-lab technological processes to make all of this happen, because this is kind of a new phenomenon that we're seeing in the textile industry. Another way that the industry is being made more sustainable is, strangely, through digital fashion. There's two kinds of digital fashion. So there's physical clothing, which means a designer is going to use digital processes. So as I mentioned earlier, CAD software, 3D modeling, augmented reality, in order to make physical clothing in the end. But from the beginning, it reduces waste because these design processes use only the materials they need for that specific clothing. We also have virtual clothing, the second kind of virtual fashion, of digital fashion, excuse me. And this is where there's never going to be a physical fabric, a physical piece of clothing. The clothing is always going to remain virtual. And brands like Ouroboros and The Fabricant put this clothing onto the consumer on an image that the consumer sends into them. So this is of course sustainable because there's nothing really produced in the end at all. There's another way that digital solutions are changing the industry, which doesn't really have much to do with sustainability. Digital solutions and digital transformation in general is actually making the industry a much more diverse and inclusive space. So this is why I mentioned earlier that consumers are starting to get more representation through digitalization. So with things like social media, new technologies, consumers have much more of a voice, so they can ask for what they want from their favorite brands. And some of the things that they're asking for are disability-friendly clothing. We can see in this image, we can have body positive clothing, so clothing that's not only fits different sizes, but is also flattering for different sizes, culturally and religiously sensitive clothing, and even gender inclusive clothing, so clothing that's either completely genderless or gender fluid or unisex, either way. One of these examples is adaptive fashion. I'm only going to mention a few examples of digital transformation solutions to make the industry more inclusive, because this could go on for a long time. So I think I'm only going to mention 2 or 3. One of them is adaptive fashion, and it's pretty self-explanatory. It's modifying clothing to fit people with physical disabilities. So brands that do this use modified manufacturing processes and new design add-ons to make this possible, because these are designs that didn't really exist before. So it can look like snap closings instead of real buttons, closings on the side of sleeves, closings in the back. So just different designs to accommodate people that are necessarily not the majority. There's a lot of examples of adaptive fashion brands, well, more and more. But one of them is Izzy Adaptive, and Izzy Adaptive is entirely for people in wheelchairs. And so they have products like jeans with padding on the back, so that you're comfortable when you sit down for long periods of time, trench coats, excuse me, that are cut short in the back, and so that it doesn't wrinkle when you're in your wheelchair. They use all sorts of design processes to adapt usual marketing tools to these new designs. The second example I'm going to talk about is body positive fashion. So this is going to be clothing that's inclusive to all body shapes and sizes, that's flattering. And kind of like digital fashion, there's also 2 types of body positive fashion, and it's likewise physical clothing and digital clothing. So what does that mean? Anifa, this is an African brand. This is a great example of physical clothing, even though it doesn't look like it in the image. This designer, she showcases her clothing on virtual models that have real bodies, as she said, as she describes herself, that represent a real woman. And so as these clothing are shown on virtual models, then the consumer can imagine what it might look like on them. And they order the clothing, it's made to order, and it comes in physical form. We also have brands like DigiGXL, which is an entirely virtual brand. And it's body positive in the sense that their models, their virtual models, have real bodies, like Anifa, how she says, but they are perfectly tailored to the consumer. So the consumer is going to send in their measurements, and the digital clothing is adapted to fit those measurements. And so now I'm going to let Jyoti summarize everything that we just said, because I know that that's a lot of information. So she's going to pack it up for you and explain in a few short points what you should take away from this presentation.
Thank you, Melanie. So first of all, let's sum up by saying that digital transformation should be regarded as an improvement to existing processes rather than a complete replacement. With changing consumer behaviors, brands must approach commerce differently by exploring omnichannel shopping means. They can thus employ digital solutions to transform their industry into one that is more sustainable, diverse, and inclusive. And finally, in order for digital transformation to be effective, teams within a fashion company must adapt their mentality and organization. So that is the end of our presentation. Of course, this is a very brief overview of what is digital transformation in the fashion industry. It's a very small overview of a wide and complex subject. But if you are interested to have more insights about this topic, you can subscribe to our newsletter to get the full white book we made about digital transformation of the fashion industry, which will be sent in the coming days. Next week, we're having a discussion with the Global Vice President of Innovation and the VP of Design and Development of Wolverine to talk about how trend forecasting helped them reach 100% sell-through in only 10 days. At Eurytech, we provide a wide range of insights on the latest trends to accompany brands in their digital transformation. So don't hesitate to reach out if you're interested.